Hello, everyone. Welcome to Founder Sunday School, the first episode here. And really, the focus of this series is to help make everyone better entrepreneurs. Whether you're already having a startup or you're thinking about starting something potentially in the future, or you're just curious, I welcome everyone. So today we're going to be talking about one of the most deeply fundamental things for founders, and that's to look at an existing process which sucks to a certain set of people and really trying to make it better. So you're not really creating some new whiz bang product. You're not creating some paradigm shifting, product or service. You're just taking what exists, saying that there's probably a better way to do it, and then going out and executing on it. So I like to call this a process innovation, right? And so you're taking some existing process, you're innovating on it, you're adding some new flavors, some new technology, some insights that you've gained over the years, and you're making it better. And as entrepreneurs, we always look for areas of opportunity when these process innovations arises. So, a great thing to kind of think about as a foundation is to be very customer and user centric. And there's a difference between customers and users. So customers ultimately, they're paying for the solution, all right? They're the ones that have the checkbook, they have the money, they have the means, right? They're the people who are paying for it, right? In the context of B2B, right, the customer is probably some higher level person who has access to company purse strings, the company credit card, or some form of acquisitions process. They are the ones that have the levers of control. The other side, you have users, right? And as the name implies, right, users use, right? It's pretty simple. Users may be customers if the users are paying for it, but it's really important that you don't conflate the two, right? Because the motivations of someone who is buying something and the motivations of someone who are using something is very different. And I think a lot of founders focus on what the users need, but forget about the customers. And ultimately, as founders, since you're building businesses, you need to think about who is ultimately paying. Because users might like it, but they're not paying, right? And ultimately, you need money to be in business, right? And so we want to be, unfortunately, at the very early stage, right, before we even think about product, and I like to call this black box methodology. Irrespective of what the final solution is, you need to chart out what the problem is and what the end state is, right? Because the black box, this is a concept that comes from many different industries. I come from computer science, so black box methodology is that irrespective of what a function does, what some piece of code is supposed to do, we know what the inputs are, we know what the outputs are, right? And it doesn't matter what happens in between, but it needs to be deterministic. Every single time you put something in, the same output comes out. As a business, you're trying to get that consistency very often. When some inputs come in, you want to have the same amount of outputs, and that the outputs are desirable to the people and to the customers, right? That the outputs are desirable to the customers, and that the customers are able to provide the desired and required inputs, right? So now that we're focusing on customers, right, and we're thinking in the lens of black box methodology, right? So we have customer inputs, right? And I might switch to a different marker if that's not showing up too well. Doesn't look like it is, so we'll switch to blue. Maybe a little bit brighter color. I think it's just because the black is dying. So we're going back to customer inputs. Inputs here, right? So we might just put that in the circle, right? I wish the black marker worked. This is gonna look a little weird. You're gonna have your black box in the middle, right? And so, let's just take what we have in the existing world, right? So we're probably looking at some form of existing tedious process, right? And this will be more clear when I provide a concrete example. Just go with me for now. So the inputs are going into this tedious process, and there's some outputs, right? And in order for entrepreneurs to innovate on some form of tedious process, the customers need to be dissatisfied with the inputs, right? Or, and this is also something very important, and as technology becomes more and more introduced, if the customers can provide additional inputs that they're not providing right now, and it's not too much of a burden for them to provide the inputs, then you could potentially, the tedious process might be able to be leveraged with additional inputs to provide more desirable outputs, right? So maybe just a different thing to think about, right? The existing process, it might be tedious, but there might be additional things that you can plug into it that produce better outputs, right? That we may not have been able to because some subset of technology hasn't existed yet, right? So, just taking the lens, I'm just going to shrink these real quick. And bring them up a little bit higher. So again, we want to be customer-centric. So this is from what customers tell us, and then in this initial example, we'll probably look at where the customer is also the user. I think it just simplifies everything. If you just discrete out, we're not talking about anything on the user side because we're not talking about any product, right? And when you become user-centric, there needs to be some product decisions. So because we don't care, it's a black box. We're just caring about inputs and outputs right now. We can be very customer-centric. All right, so we're just going to put inputs here at the top again. We're going to put some form of process in the middle, right? And we're going to have what the process outputs. So let's just pretend, right, we're going back in time. I don't actually know when car washes were invented, but maybe I should have looked it up beforehand, but we'll just stick with the 60s, 70s, sounds about the right time for automated car washes to have been invented. Sounds about reasonable. But imagine that back in the day, everyone had to wash it by hand, hose connected to, your water line, and you're doing it out in your driveway, right? And, everybody's doing it. It's just something you do. It sucks. Done on the weekend, some bird crapped on your car, and now you got to go out and clean it again, right? And maybe you have some kids, and you can pawn it off to your kids to do for maybe a meager allowance. But ultimately this sounds tedious, and I as an entrepreneur think that there's an opportunity there, right? So when we think about a car wash, right, and we think about the traditional manual process of cleaning a car, let's think about what are the inputs, right? What are the customer inputs? So obviously you have a dirty car, right? Car, truck, just gonna simplify it into a car, right? The input of labor, right, is the car owner / whoever they, kids, whatever, that they're using, right? You might have some water and then maybe some soap, right? And, maybe like OTC soap, right? Just whatever you can grab from a retail location, right? So from Market Basket or whatever. And hey, how much should this cost conceivably? Let's just say that cost them, maybe $10 for water, soap, all those types of stuff, person hours, maybe it takes you half an hour, all that type of stuff. Ultimately, it comes up to $10 of how much you budget, right? That's what maybe you're like, $10 sounds reasonable, all right? Now, obviously, you're hand washing your car, right? So I'm not going to list out how to hand wash a car, but I'm sure you're going to figure out how to manually wash a car, right? And it's a tedious process, right? So it has been designated by the customer as tedious. Sometimes processes, they're not so bad, right? Some people can live with it. That's a danger point for a entrepreneur, because you want to be solving pains and not things that people can live with. Because if they can live with it, right, there's probably less of a likelihood that they're going to change from it. But if it is a tedious process that someone actively hates to do, right, then it brings you, it aligns them a little bit more to, participate in whatever innovative product that you're bringing to the market. All right, so on outputs. So, let's just say you're hand washing your car, you're not really an expert at it, right? So let's just say, focus, camera, focus. Damn. We have, oh geez, the marker's dying on me. Back up, red marker. We have a somewhat cleaner car, right? Because, you're doing it manually, maybe you miss a spot, maybe something doesn't come out, you're like, screw it, it's good enough, right? And so that's what you get there, right? You have a car owner who is now tired, right? Tired car owner, quality of life has gone down, they're sweaty, they're tired, they're irritable, it contributes to many other downstream things, being a worse parent, being a worse spouse, not participating in other hobbies. It's just a drag on the rest of the day. And you have a dirty driveway, which means extra work. When you're gonna have to clean off the soap, you're gonna have a wet driveway, which could potentially lead to potential issues down the road. It just sucks, right? And as it turns out, between water, soap, and labor, you thought it was gonna cost $10 at the beginning. The actual cost was $25. I'm liking this red marker. Does it show better? It does. Great. Awesome. Or it's super blurry. I'm sorry. I'll fix some of the things in post if they're blurry. All right. So this is what we have in the existing from the customer lens, right? Customer was willing to pay $10. As it turns out, the actual cost was $25. They have a dirty car. The output of this was a somewhat cleaner car, but not really that clean. They have, a car owner. They're tired and irritable at the end. Soap and water. Now it's all over your driveway, right? And let's just say, right, that, enough people complain about it that you as an entrepreneur start to think, hey, can we make this somewhat better? So, given that these are the inputs, right, you start thinking about this middle ground, right? And obviously, with a little bit of hindsight, we get to, obviously peer into the future and see what actually worked, right? And so it's not a hand wash. I don't know. I actually wrote hand washed car. You're going to go through an automated car wash, right? So it's a drive-through. You go through a bunch of robotic pieces. Will be spraying down your car with water, soap, and then they're going to be have these little rollers with cloths on them, and they're going to be cleaning off your car, and then they're going to have a major fan and blower to dry off your car, right? And so that's what's going to be happening here. Come on, focus, damn you. All right, and so given an automated car wash, you might build a prototype, right? But right now we're not really worried, again, because it's a black box methodology, right? So, you go and you talk to the customer, right? And maybe you give them a little bit of an impression of what you want to do. A lot of founders, right, will come up with some direction, right? Nobody wants to say, like, I'm selling some form of black box, but ultimately I did list out what in reality, a robo car wash will do. But, it's a black box. Could be, could not be what I just listed. Just saying, like, hey, we're going to make this a lot better. maybe use some form of automation, 60s, 70s language version of that, right, in order to make your life better. But what would make your life better, right? Like, what are outputs that you're fine with, right? And starting with fine with, happy with, you start with fine with because you're going to graduate eventually to, what someone is super pleased with. But you're just trying to figure things out. Spending a lot of time to make everyone happy will make no one happy because ultimately you're probably going to run out of resources. You're probably going to be chasing too many things, right? And ultimately things are going to fall through the cracks and, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. So right now we're just going to list what what are the things that people are desiring, right? So, obviously it's often very easy to just flip, right, inputs to just be their desired outputs. So obviously you want a clean car, totally clean, if you will, but that's happy, so we're just going to say clean car. Whatever subjectively people think is a clean car, a comfortable car owner. Again, somewhat subjective, but given the existing thing, just not being tired, right, is what comfortable conceivably could be meaning after a bunch of interviews that you have with car owners, right? Clean driveway, again, somewhat subjective, but given the scope of the project, just get that soap and water off of my driveway, right? Something super simple. It doesn't have to be something super flowery, right? And I think that's something that can be very easy, right? Is that a desired cost of $10 is still a desired cost of $10, right? Is actual, in actuality, $10 cost, right? So, irrespective of how we actually do the automated car wash, we've actually come up with, right, between inputs and outputs, what this new process should look like, right? Obviously something that's better than what's before, right? This automated car wash is going to get dirty car, the car owner in some respects, potentially not even the car owner if it's automated, right? As we in real life know, the car owner needs to still drive the car to a car wash, so still need an input from a car owner, but as long as the car owner is still comfortable with just driving their car up and letting it roll through a drive-through car wash, totally fine. The inputs of soap and water, the customer doesn't actually need to provide it, right, in real life, but we don't know that yet. It's a black box, but eliminating the need to actually go out and buy water and soap might contribute to a more comfortable car owner. The driveway in real life doesn't even become a part of it. And $10, well, that's just a budgetary constraint for when you build this black box into a real thing, right? So hopefully that helps you in kind of calculating in an early stage, right? How to think about some form of process innovation, right? So now you can go in and you can say, all right, dirty car to clean car. All right, what are the steps in the automated car wash we need to do that? I'll have a different talk about designing your MVP so that you achieve these desired outputs from the customers, from all the data you gather in customer discovery. Customer discovery will also be a different talk that I'll do another Sunday. But, back to this stuff, right? In the $10, right? The margins that you are going to generate from these automated car washes needs to be able to support a $10 price tag. Could be more, could be less, right? But you need to be able to determine that your business is going to be profitable based off of a $10 price tag, right? Could be less, by the way, than what is desired. Make a customer happy, but again, if the customer is fine with $10, then that can be what you stick with, right? And so, another thing that I'll kind of slide in and do kind of a detour in this process innovation discovery framework that I've kind of built here with the black box methodology is that you can actually generate your value proposition from this. And so from the kind of Simon Sinek start with why and then go into how and into what. Your value proposition, right, is your how. And using the black box methodology is often great because if we don't actually know what's going on here, and again, we just go back to there's some process, right, that these things are being contributed in here, these things being here, black box, I don't know what the process is, right? It prevents a lot of people from doing what I absolutely hate, which is injecting their solution into their value proposition. The value proposition is the value that someone gets from your company, regardless of what your solution is, right? It should be what these desired outputs are, the value that someone derives, right? And who cares about what the solution is, right? Your value, the proposition that you're providing, right, is it should matter what the solution is, right? So, okay. So when we're talking about value proposition, easily you can just take these outputs here, right, and you can flip them into a value proposition statement, right, by just taking these and condensing them into sentences. Now, very often there are 4 ways to think about, value that a customer derives from a company, from a product, from a service, etc., right? And it's whether or not someone creates something, they eliminate, all right? They create, eliminate, it's opposites of each other, right? And then the other pair of opposites, they increase something or they reduce something, all right? And so you can take these as kind of starting points for different values that someone gets out of, whatever the final solution is, right? So, when you're talking about creating, right, from this list, right, what would you be creating? You'd be creating an experience. Everyone loves in the 21st century, right, to be able to create experiences. It fits with the current generation, right, of wanting to be a part of experiences, right? Experiences and dedicated space for cleaning cars. Right? So this experience and the dedicated space for cleaning cars is the value to enable a clean car, right? Eliminating, right? So we're going to eliminate the work by the car owner, right? To manually clean their car. Maybe next time I'll set up a camera here so that as I'm writing, you can see, right? Technically, you can also consider this maybe a reduction, right? Because you might not completely eliminate it. You might just reduce it. There are degrees, right, in which, someone might derive value, right? It goes into kind of a competitive advantage because if you reduce the amount of work that someone does, someone could just very easily just say, I've totally eliminated it, right? And so there's on the spectrum, right? But reducing might be more profitable than eliminating, right? And so there's kind of an ebb and balance flow there, but ultimately, these values, right? When you create this value proposition, right? It's coincided with the fact that when you did your customer discovery to figure out those outputs, right? These are things that people want, right? And you've gotten the range between what people are fine with and what people are happy with. You start with what people are fine with, and over time, as your business scales, you get into trying to make people happy and enthused and want to spread the word and evangelize about your company. And sometimes your value propositions might shift over time, right? You might start with, hey, reducing the amount of work. Eventually, someone comes up with a valet service. So now the car owner goes to a car wash and they don't even have to drive through. They get out of the car and someone else does all of the work for them, and then they just pick up the car at the end, right? When we're thinking about increasing, right? So before we had a somewhat clean car, obviously, we're going to increase the grammar, the cleanliness. um, yeah, the cleanliness of the car. And just sit there and think about how to spell it for a second. Increase the cleanliness of the car, right? And another reduction, right? So it used to cost 25. Now we want to get it within the user's desired budget of $10, right? So we're going to reduce the cost of doing a car wash. So as you see here, right, I didn't talk too much about the solution, maybe a little bit here with like the dedicated space, right? But it's not really specific to like, we're getting robotics and we're going to have some, computer vision that helps us scan the car. So we're doing the optimal, like none of that is here, right? We're not talking about any like specific solution oriented stuff. We're talking about regardless of what we eventually choose to be in the MVP and in the final product, these are the values that someone can grab out of our eventual product and service. So hopefully that helps you understand in this early stages, you finish brainstorming an idea and you really want to affect change in some form of process, right? After you do some customer discovery to kind of fill in the input, process, output portion of this framework, right? Once you fill it out and have a really clean input output methodology or thought process going on here, then you can start building value props off of it, right? And using create, eliminate, increase, and reduce as starting points, right? Obviously, these four terms are not the only, terms in creating value propositions, right? Or they're just guidelines, right, to start someone off with, right? You can, as you become more experienced, right, there might be other, key power action verbs that you might want to use in the future, right? But these are pretty, basic and safe words. And I think that since they're opposites of each other, and that you can just take the list of outputs that someone wants, right? You can just say, does that exist? No, it doesn't. We create it. It does exist, but people don't want it to exist. We eliminate. Maybe some more moderate options, right? Increasing and reducing, right? As opposed to creating and eliminating. Hopefully this gives you a really great idea of how to go through the process innovation discovery framework using the black box methodology of not caring about what your final solution is and being able to create very clean inputs, outputs, right? And then from those inputs and outputs, create value propositions. So just a repetition there. So cool. I think that concludes this Founder Sunday School session. I hope you enjoyed. If you do, please subscribe so that you'll be notified next Sunday when the next episode comes out. Hopefully, I get it out every Sunday, and provide a comment. This is what I've been using to create companies in the past that has worked out for me, and what I help a lot of founders with. But I think that this is an evolving process. As you work through, these things are not set in stone, as these things should be evolving as you start figuring out, hey, maybe my solution can't provide some of the outputs, or they start eliminating inputs, or we need additional inputs. Just as those things are evolving in this framework, the framework itself could certainly be improved as well. So I am certainly open to hearing about it in the comment section down below. Thank you very much, everyone, and I hope to see you